thank you so much to Insight for allowing us to partner and share what we've learned over the last 10 plus years about scaling communications for growth companies. Hoping you can all see my screen now. Christina, I assume will let me know if you can't. I have, first I'll just tell you quickly about who I am and Highwire. Um, and our agenda for the day. So some basic questions about why we need PR, some thoughts on potentially how to structure your team, both internally, and then how to work with external resources, which a lot of companies, especially as they scale, do start to do. And then sort of the go-to-market, what a comms program looks like in the beginning. We'll spend very little time on that because I know you're all kind of past that now. And then what do we need to look out for as we grow? What are some of the challenges and opportunities that we have? About Highwire, why we're qualified to speak today is we specialize in working with growth stage companies, mostly well-funded, pretty far along in their journey. They're ambitious companies looking to do something. Hence, when they go through their, further along in their journey, they often take us with them, and we work with publicly traded companies as well. So probably where you're sitting and where you want to go. And we have offices all across the US and partners with international agencies as well. Just about me, very quickly, I've been doing technology PR on the agency side for several years now, and I have been at a few different agencies. I've been at Highwire for 5 years. I started our New York office. Our founders are still in place in San Francisco, and we are independently owned. But before that, I worked for 7 years at an investor relations firm and learned a lot about IPO communications. My time there coincided with the massive uptick in B2B technology IPOs, SaaS, specifically SaaS B2B technology IPOs. So can speak to what I've learned about IPO comms, although with any of this, it's not any sort of legal advice, and I would encourage you before you do anything to talk to your legal counsel. So again, why should we care about PR? I think you're probably all a little bit beyond this stage now, but earlier stage startups, it can feel overwhelming to think about building your reputation. Like, why do we need to focus on this? You know what, we've built this amazing product and people will find it. Or we're doing lead gen, so we're getting leads in that way. But obviously you have bigger ambitions than just sort of selling product to your current type client base, whether that's you want to break into new markets, whether you have bigger corporate goals. Those are the kinds of things we'll talk about today. Again, if you don't do this, it's not that you won't have PR or that you won't have an external reputation. It's that you won't be in charge of it. Someone else will be. How many times have you heard, oh, a competitor in the market is saying this about us? It's not true, but if you aren't taking control of your perception and your reputation, then someone else will. So again, the sort of how to get started is interesting because we're looking at the who here. How do we structure a communications team? And really the biggest thing to have in place first is someone that can take the vision of the business and the business goals and translate that into a marketing program and marketing direction. So whether that's a CM, many times our direct clients are oftentimes at larger stages of manager or director of communications, but a lot of times they report to a VP of marketing, a CMO. Sometimes even the VP of marketing is still our direct contact. As long as there's someone that is setting that overall strategic direction, PR is, in my view, in support of your business goals. So without understanding and having that bigger picture, there's not really any point in doing it. When you get down to the execution then, and by execution, I don't mean just this actually physically doing PR, but even executing the strategy and even developing the PR specific strategy, there are many different ways that you can structure your team. Smaller, earlier stage companies tend to they tend to have a hybrid role. So maybe you have someone on the marketing team, usually not from the lead gen side, but usually more from like a brand side. Say someone who's, can handle PR and social, this sort of hybrid, PR and analyst relations, or PR and content, PR and events. So you could start off kind of that way before you do your first full-time hire for an actual, PR lead. And that is probably, you can also, contract this. You can contract for a, marketing contact or a lead, and then work with an agency, that sort of hybrid role. As you mature, I would say the best practice is that you have a dedicated in-house PR person managing an outside agency. So why would you want to hire an agency? Obviously, I see the value of this because it's been my whole career, but I think most of you, if you talk to your peers, will probably say that, most growth stage companies do have a PR agency for all those reasons that we talked about earlier. You're ambitious, you have bigger marketing and business goals that you want to fulfill. So what value could an agency bring to you? Market expertise is certainly one, and PR expertise, especially if you don't have a dedicated in-house person. The agency can almost be like a mentor, a role model for someone who might be more junior or a hybrid internally. Media relationships, a lot of times, clients will say, oh, we don't know, they have other clients, like it's not necessarily a good thing. It's actually a very positive thing for you, because the media know, especially if they have other clients in the same general orbit or industry as you, not direct competitors, of course, but media will know that that agency is a resource for them, and they can come to them, and they'll be able to efficiently get, commentary or answers for stories that they're working on from a variety of different perspectives and executives. So that, in my view, and Highwire's view, is one very strong thing that we bring, having that client base that media know, and it becomes almost like a beacon. Know-how, obviously. Scalability, you can scale the agency up or down a lot easier than you can scale up or down internally, especially for, we all know what the hiring market is like, and how challenging and competitive that can be. An agency can have, say you have a big trade show coming up, an agency can pull in additional PR support. They can also provide value-added services. Most modern agencies these days are offering integrated communications, which we definitely do, for example, whether that's, drafting content or managing social for you, or any kind of digital projects or ongoing support, whatever it is, an agency you can usually stand up a lot easier than hiring. And again, it might also be even lower cost. If you have one, specific project that you're going to be working on, it is a lot easier to ask your agency to scale up than it is to, hire another dedicated internal person. And of course, if you hire a dedicated internal person, you can have them work on other things besides PR, but, in general, it can be lower cost when you add on the benefits. Prestige sometimes. This is probably more applies for smaller companies, but when you're just getting started in the market, it can be helpful to hire a PR agency that has a reputation already established and makes people take you seriously. If you're hire a freelancer, sometimes freelancers can bring value as well. Highwire works with a network of freelancers as well, in terms of like, we have done work with them, we know they could do good work, and if a client needs a smaller size resource, we will refer to them. But you generally would like to have an agency, especially as you mature. So how do you find the right agency? Definitely talking to your VCs, of course, looking on the platform, which is a great resource. And you want to talk to definitely more than one. You want to talk to a couple of agencies and get a sense for what's out there. Your industry contacts, media, you can ask media who they find to be, again, a good resource for them, who works with companies similar to yours. If you are in ad tech, for example, and you ask a reporter at Adweek or TechCrunch, the ad tech reporter at TechCrunch, who is a good agency, or who do you work with the most? They can give you a recommendation. A lot of times people will come to us because they'll see that we've won awards. So sometimes marketers use that kind of qualification to find an agency. Looking at companies you admire, a lot of times people will say, you know what, we think this company is doing PR very well, we want to work with their agency. And technology partners, again, that's that sort of like making sure that the agency has experience in your sphere of expertise and industry, because it will be beneficial. For example, we have a lot of clients in sort of AI, automation, and then we have technologies that mesh well with that, such as low code. So that makes it convenient because we know a lot of the same media, a lot of the same executives. We can cross-promote clients when they're going to each other's trade shows or whatever it is. So that can be a way to find them as well. Again, what should you look for? You should look for industry. I personally think that industry expertise is very important. I think it's probably the most important, especially in technology. Again, similar size clients or looking down the road where you want to be. And the most important thing is a good team fit. You need to meet them, I would say, in person. You want to know that the people that you're talking to, at least like the lead people that you're talking to especially, are not going to go away after the pitch, that they're going to be there, and that you have confidence. You want to talk to their client references, their existing clients, their former clients, and find out how they are on a day-to-day basis. We have one consultant that says, I think everyone should just during the agency search process go out to dinner. And certainly doing a formal RFP can be, honestly a big lift on the agency side and on the client side. But for now, that seems to be the best process everyone has settled on. So doing that is definitely, again, just to get a sense for how you interact with them, what is the vibe. That is going to be hugely important as you embark on your journey with the agency. Once you have an agency, how do you get the maximum value? I would say the biggest factor is that you want to make sure that this is a true partnership, which means all the good and all the bad, it's out on the table. If you are facing a regulatory action or worried about facing one, there is nothing good comes of not telling your agency that. Of course there are, disclosure rules and things like that, but the agency is essentially like over the wall. They have signed an NDA. They should be an extension of your internal team. They should not be looked at as, sort of outsiders. For example, at investor relations firms, it's common to share material information even in advance because we're giving guidance on how to best position and prepare for these material events. So for that reason, you should find an agency that you feel you can trust with that kind of information. On the client side, you need to have a dedicated manager to manage the relationship. The PR agency is only as good as the information that they can get from the client side. So they need to have a partner on the other side to give them information that they need. And then the agency needs to be funneling information from the outside, whether that's feedback from the media or that they're getting or trends that they're seeing in the market. And they need to be sending that back to someone on the client side so that there's that give and take of information and that's how you get the benefit. Executive time and access, the agency should not be seen as competitive with the internal contact. That I would say, even at the publicly traded size, if you're like a $5 billion less agency and the agency is our company and the agency is doing corporate communications for you, the CEO should know at least your agency lead's name, and you should feel comfortable choose an agency that you feel comfortable putting that lead person in front of your executive. Maybe it's always in partnership with the CMO or with the VP of communications, but you want to, again, have them have full access, especially as you scale and you get busy, and being sure that the agency like understands enough about the business that they can interact with, your head of channel or your head of AI directly, and not feeling like you always have to be the gatekeeper. Over time, that's the kind of relationship you want to evolve to. Clear objectives, of course. If you're not sure what you want to accomplish as a marketer, as a company, it's going to be very hard to judge the agency's success. So just being clear about communicating that and making sure that the agency understands that. The onboarding process is very important. I didn't write that down here, but it is. Most times we will come and work on site at a client, the whole team, for a full day, a half day, meet with everyone from HR to the head of product to marketing, to understand the full picture, at least get a grounding of the full picture of the company and what it's trying to accomplish. So, and then have regular ongoing sessions too, where if there's a new product, you're inviting the agency to hop on the webinar and get up to speed on that new product that you're going to be launching, or having, again, going back to executive time and access, having the agency do sourcing calls for thought leadership topics with your executives. Again, even if you're still there with them, that's fine, but allowing them to have access to the DNA, the unique things about your company, that is how they will best be able to sell the story. Highwire personally believes that always on is the most actually efficient way and effective way to do awareness building. So it's a cumulative effort. A lot of times, smaller startups will hire an agency, say for funding, and then they'll say, okay, well, now we're going to focus on product or whatever it is. You essentially lose all that momentum from the awareness campaign that you might have been successful with if you aren't constantly following up. We all know how fast news moves these days and how noisy the environment is. So if you are not constantly working at building your reputation, you will fade to the background. All right, this one is a little cheeky. I wrote, you get what you pay for, which is generally true. I would just say beware if you are talking to agencies of a certain type and one of them, the budget seems wildly different than the others, then there's probably a reason for that. I would say most agencies, for example, in my competitive set, who, by the way, many of whom we are friendly with and will refer business to each other if we have a conflict, is we all, have a general range. So you should you should not solely make your decision based on the resources required. You want to find the agency that's going to be the best fit, but of course everyone has budgets. So I would say just do your due diligence there. All right, so once you've mapped out your team initially, or figured out a way to have that sort of internal, external balance, what do you do next? Again, this is probably a little bit elementary for you, so we'll go fast, but building your toolkit. Again, before you go to the market, you want to have all of these things already outlined, and you want to know the stories that you're going to tell. You want to have developed a point of view on the market and where it's going. You want to make sure that you're moving with the trend, which I'll talk about shortly. And you want to make sure the basics are in place. It's amazing how many times I will look at a prospect and go to their website and, yeah, sure, maybe they have like all of their press releases on the website, but there's no media coverage showcased, or it's really hard to find a contact for if I'm a press person who I reach out to. Again, the more transparency and the more assets you can provide to the press on your site, whether that's screenshots and headshots and bios, and having all of that uploaded onto your press site is a great way to make it easy for media, because we all know how hard it can be to get media interest, and we don't want to do anything to lose that once we have it. And also it just helps with proactively telling your story. Anything you can think of that you can have in advance and put it up there on the website for media is great to have. And also preparing your own stories that you want to proactively take to the media. So oftentimes funding is seen as, that sort of initial intro to a company or even a reintroduction or an upscaling. For example, I have an example here. This one's kind of old, but our former client Zscaler raised $100 million. This was 5 years ago when $100 million was a very big deal. And we made sure that we told the story about the why. Like, why are they raising this money? Yes, everyone, all the media, everyone gets caught up in the number, but you also want to have the why. You want to have your story crystallized about what you are trying to build. Otherwise, it's somewhat of a wasted opportunity. And obviously, you will continue to do funding news throughout your whole cycle, even depending, right before or leading up to an IPO. So you want to be thoughtful always about how you do your funding announcements. Of course, there's always a lot of, interest in maximizing the publicity, the PR value of funding. It's gotten to be even, a very competitive market with a lot of funding where 100 million now is almost like the sort of requirement for media to be interested, as crazy as that sounds to say out loud. So we often advise clients to do things like consider an exclusive where you're, again, you're being thoughtful. You're cultivating a relationship with one media person who you feel you're going to invest time so they tell your story in a thoughtful way. And this will be a sort of theme as you mature. Sometimes you're going to want to focus more on finding that one journalist who's the right journalist and has the right reach and can tell the story in the right way versus getting it out everywhere. Especially if you tell that story in the right way, it can act as a sort of lighthouse and then garner other media interest. Even if it's in a trade publication, a lot of times you will see themes or ideas or trends first hit the trades and then bubble up as they become even bigger into mainstream media. So yes, funding can be a launch pad and it can continue to be a visibility event for you throughout your growth as you continue to secure funding, but it's not the end all sort of be all. Again, and if you don't follow it up with like this, so what's next? What are we actually doing? It's not going to be worth much. All right, so now getting into, assuming you've raised a couple rounds, you've gotten all of the basics down, what next? What do you have to be thinking about? The first thing is, again, you want to live the story. You want to be always building towards your external reputation in your story. So that means, especially with the media, building the relationship, having patience. You're not looking for transactional things. You're not looking to call someone up and say, hey, we have a product announcement. If you're calling a media person, you should already have established, you're the agency or whomever, already established a relationship with them. They should know who you are and you should know who they are. You should know what they're interested in and what's going to drive their interest so you can develop the right strategy to talk to them. And you want to be a useful resource to them. Sometimes I compare it to walking into a cocktail party. You don't want to be the guest that walks in constantly and says, hi, let me tell you about me. This is what I've been doing. You want to listen to them and understand what they are interested in and see how you could help them. And then, as we know, in other aspects of life, eventually it will come around to benefit you as well. And that's kind of how you want to approach media relationships, especially as you scale and grow. Hopefully these media will be with you throughout your journey so that someday if you're standing up there, ringing the bell, again, that's not the first time they're hearing from you. They will know you way in advance of that. Accessibility, credibility, and cooperation. Again, you don't want to just say that you're the leader, you want to be the leader. So that means not just, that means having the sort of, goods to back up what you're saying, whether that's conducting external research. A lot of times clients, especially on the B2B side, will partner with analyst firms or other media even, and do a sort of, market study, or look at the future of topics. Like, for example, we have a lot of clients that work on in the loose future of work type area. So they'll do thought leadership efforts around that. Of course, you want to be able to like make sure that information that you're providing is accurate, and that you're establishing yourself as trustworthy, but having those resources that you've invested in developing will go a long way towards establishing that credibility and making you a good resource for the media. That said, obviously you have an agenda, and you know what you want to get out of each interaction with the media, even if it's just we want to further the relationship. We're not looking for a specific outcome of this interaction. Not every interview is going to lead to press coverage, which is something that can be hard for even more mature companies and executives to grasp, but it is well worth educating them on the fact that you're building a long-term relationship, and not every time you talk to a media person is it going to result in media coverage. You want to make sure that the media trained executives, that your executives are all media trained, and that they all say the same thing. It should not be a surprise what one executive says when another executive reads about it in, say, the Wall Street Journal. You want to make sure that they're all kind of have that same, even if they have their own, of course, different perspectives. Say they're technical, say someone is a technical expert, someone is an expert in, HR, whatever it is. They'll all have their own perspectives, but in terms of the corporate story and the company direction, you want to make sure it's the same. And again, remember, you're building towards the big picture and the long term. And I cannot say this enough, practice. The best executives that you see out there on TV giving speeches, there is no magic. You can hire the best media trainer in the industry. There's one trainer that many companies use. We also do media training, but it doesn't matter. If you're not going to practice and invest time in it, you're not going to get better. So sometimes it can be, it can be challenging for an executive to fit that into their schedule and try to make time for it. But I'll say, like, practice in the mirror in the morning when you're getting ready what you want to say in this interview, so that you've thought it out. The worst thing you can do in a media interview is be thinking about what you want to say. You already know. I think that there was a famous president or general, I can't remember who it was, that at a press conference he said, "Okay, I have my answers. I'm ready for your questions." And that is somewhat how you should approach. Of course, you don't want to be rude, and you want to make sure the media person is getting value out of the interview as well, but you want to be prepared. All right. Always be on the news cycle. This is something that we preach highly, and it's becoming more and more apparent that the news cycle just speeds up every day and becomes more and more competitive. So it is very difficult to go against that cycle. If all the media are to the right and you're trying to steer them left, it's going to be difficult. Does that mean that you are limited to only talking about, the major trends? In reality, you are getting funding from investors. Investors think that you are part of a major trend. It's just a matter of narrowing in on what those major trends are and what your unique perspective is. So here we have, a sample like trend line starting at AI and machine learning, which pretty much these days, no matter what industry you're in, especially in technology, there's going to be some relevance there. At the same time, you need to make sure that what you're saying is believable and backed up by technology, and you're not overselling it. Automation, hence, some of what could be considered the end result of these technologies. And that's really where it gets interesting, right? So talking about how not only your technology works, but what the end impact is going to be, how it's going to change the world. The cloud wars, so this is, again, a never-ending topic, and these might cycle around. This is a very basic trendscape, but we would be, doing a lot more in-depth one, and it obviously changes. So this is something you want to do on a quarterly basis, identify what these trends are. For example, when it's time for, a big trade show by one of the major cloud vendors, the cloud wars could be front and center, or it's earnings. You need to like be prepared and know that those things are coming. And then again, that where they're positioned on your trendscape will change. Again, even if we get it, you have product news to put out there, you do have your own agenda that you want to see in the media as well. So the key is to tie everything that you do, all your internal events to external news hooks. This is an example of a recent story for enterprise security client, Mobile Iron, and it talks about, is the headline, Mobile Iron launches a new suite of authentication products? No, because no offense to Mobile Iron. Is that interesting? It's interesting because everyone hates passwords. They're about to die. So that's the trend. That's the so what. So leading with that will make someone interested in your suite of authentication products. And that's how you have to approach any kind of event. Again, developing long-term strategic relationships with reporters, identifying, in this case, Rosalie Chan at Business Insider, what she is interested in will allow us to work successfully with her by finding a ground between what we want to talk about and what she and her readers want to hear about. So, listening to journalists and then mapping to their needs is how you have success. And again, that means maybe you got one piece of coverage for your new board member, but it's a story that is meaningful versus, maybe widespread. Similar, giving customer exclusives, especially especially for top tier media like the Wall Street Journal. You want to make sure that you're again developing that relationship and that you're giving them something exclusive, something they can't find somewhere else. Going beyond product, this as you scale becomes more and more important. Is you at this stage are doing PR almost as much, this last bullet here, as much for the market as you are for the company. Anyone who's ever seen a roadshow deck for an IPO knows, or I'm sure an investor deck for to secure funding, that you want to talk to, again, that trend in that market and how it's, sort of a greenfield market. It's just developing. Yes, you want to say that you've secured footing in it and that you're strong, but that you're, there's a wide open field for growth. So how do you do that? You focus on the fact that it's not just a one-person show anymore. When you're smaller, usually the CEO will do all the media opportunities and be the spokesperson almost no matter what the topic is. But you want to build out the bench and show that you're a mature company. You want to invest in, again, I said this a million times now, but it's true, in building those relationships with business publications especially, and proving that you can be a valuable resource to them. You do want to raise visibility for your CEO for the purpose of, again, the company and showing that it's led by a leader. And one of the ways you can do that is start broadening, not just going to your own industry conferences, but looking at key technology, financial analyst conferences. Sometimes the financial analyst conferences will have private company tracks where private companies can present. For example, right now, the Fortune Brainstorm Tech Conference is going on in Aspen. It's a great conference even to go and attend. Have your CEO go, attend, network, see what the value is, and then build up to try to have a speaking position there. Again, once you've proved to the Fortune editors that you can be a good resource for them. And you should be identifying those conferences way in advance that you want to have a strategic presence at, and seeing what is worth and which ones are worth and really investing in. Everyone wants to gear up to that profile story, and as you become a significant player in your market, there's no reason why you shouldn't. We took a look at the 3 years of profile stories and tried to analyze what are some of the trigger points for securing a profile story. So whether that's a lot of times it's about failure, it's personal stories, it's it's about it's bringing the story to life in a way that might be surprising. And that is, by personal stories, we mean quirky interests, we mean of the CEO, and I'll give an example on the next slide. It can also be a significant customer or that you've secured and that's really going to, sort of make your business. Or a lot of times it's can be through, we have here in the middle, failure / challenge breakthrough. You hit a wall, you had to pivot, and you've come out the other side of that. People love that redemption sort of narrative. Again, it doesn't have to be so dramatic, but I had one founder during the IPO process who was telling media, during a lot of companies that have been around for a long time, during the 2008 crisis, had to move into his parents' garage and mortgaged his house to save the company, and then now he's standing there ringing the bell in the New York Stock Exchange. Like, what a fantastic emotionally moving journey that is, that someone will want to read about. And I can get into more details if people have questions about this afterwards. But basically, you want to have some version of all of this, and then you also need that. We cannot forget about going with the trend. We need to have a why now. Why should someone write this story about your executive now? Is it because you just hit a big milestone? You hit $100 million in revenue and you're willing to share that with the journalist? Is it that you became a unicorn? Do people still say that? I don't know if they still say that. Anyway, some kind of big milestone, whether it's financial or not. Oops. And here's an example of a Forbes story that we worked on for our Appian client with Alex Conrad, who I'm sure many of you might know. He's an esteemed journalist at Forbes, and the story is about Appian, and they're a publicly traded technology company, a B2B technology company. But what is the lead? This is a picture of Matt in his home study where he is playing board games, because he is a competitive board game designer and player, and Alex went to the World's Board Gaming Championships with him, as you can read about in the story. So that's something that you don't hear about every day. So it's a great, interesting hook. At the same time, Appian had an IPO 2 years ago, so it was coming up on the anniversary of the IPO. So that is the sort of timely factor, especially in light of the fact that there had been a resurgence in IPOs this year. So you can feel free to seek out the story and see all the different elements that went into place there. But again, that is like identifying a journalist that you really want to build a relationship with and giving them access, and it's also addressing their questions seriously about if you have challenges. It doesn't, everyone, every company has a challenge that they need to face. Oftentimes it's public, talked about in the market. It's not all it's not all roses. No story is going to be an ad, because if it were, then no one would want to read it. So it has to have some sort of meat and how you've overcome a challenge in it, which again, you can read the story and see what it is, but at the same time, that just makes it more interesting and more credible. This is about a slide that I'm sure many of you marketers have seen before, the peso slide. And this just means that we recognize that public relations up here on the right is not in a vacuum. There is a whole integrated funnel approach that we should take. And whether that means your agency is executing all or part or just one of these, it doesn't matter. We know that we operate in the greater marketing landscape, and that we should all be sharing information and sharing strategy with each other. Playing defense, not just offense. As you become more prominent in your industry, it's even more likely that there's going to be headwinds that you face, issues that you might face, whether that's with your product. Privacy is a huge issue these days, as we all know from opening the front page of the news today. IT, whether that's outages, all of these kinds of things, corporate issues. every company has will face some kind of reputational challenge at some point, whether it's on a huge scale or a small scale. You want to be prepared. And it's also a great way, I think, for PR to really show the value of how you're not just, you're not just trying to raise their reputation, but you're being thoughtful about it. And you want to make sure that you are coordinating with all the other leads and really putting together, communications can be the glue that, and in my experience, working on a lot of data security incidents, can be the glue that actually leads and brings together all of these different not factions, all these different departments or leaders during an actual issue. So this is a great area for communications to show that they can take a leading role, and also again be a thoughtful role, and recognizing that a lot of times communications will say, we want to tell the story, and then there's issues, especially if you work in a regulated industry, there's issues with risk and compliance that communications always needs to be aware of. So documenting all of this, while it can be it can take a little time, frankly, and you can make this as in-depth as you want to or not. You could even just focus on what is the sort of most likely issue that you're going to face, but having it all down on paper comes in handy should you ever face something. And then even doing like a tabletop exercise to role play it, whether you do this with your communications firm or internally, it's definitely an exercise that's worthwhile. Taking it global. As you grow, I'm sure many of you are, this sort of growth stage company, that you have communications built out in other parts of the world, as we should. And again, if you are coming from another country, it can be a decision. It's a strategic decision as to when and which markets to invest in. So I don't have any sort of hard numbers like when you reach a certain amount of percentage of revenue, but I would say when there is a business need, when there's a desire to grow globally, again, if you have a financial product, maybe it's very tailored to the US and the US market, the US currency, and going global is a lot more complicated of a proposition than it is for, say, I don't know, an ERP, well, ERP probably would have that too, but anyway, a SaaS, provider, then you might go it global at different times. But no matter at what point you decide to do it, you want to start small. You want to maybe start with one country or one region. Generally, you want to make sure that no matter where you are executing communications, that it is aligned centrally and managed centrally. As you get bigger, of course, maybe you'll have a comms manager in several different countries, but ideally they are still part of the broader communications team and very much aligned with what the global communication strategy is. So even if like they are a global PR manager in another country, or sorry, even if they're a PR manager in another country, that they are part of the communications organization, not say part of the, not direct, or maybe they have a dotted line, maybe they're not just directly part of their home country organization, that they're also part of the global comms team. But you can have, of course, a global PR manager in your home market. You could hire an agency or even freelancers in that local market to get going. If you do that, again, I would say the same thing for ongoing communications. There's no like, well, we're going to launch a product there, so we'll hire this agency and for a project, and we'll launch the project and be done. It's going to take time to build up your reputation in the market. You're going to have to invest in either getting your executive in country out in the market, or having, especially if your CEO if your home market is different, than having your CEO invest time and travel there, which presumably they will be doing anyway because they're building the business there. So again, it's the key tenet, I think, is it's ongoing support, it's centrally managed, and it's locally executed. Okay, the fun part. Everyone always wants to talk about the IPO. And again, I will emphasize that this is a changing market. I won't go into the history, but I would say IPO communications has changed more in the last couple of years than it has probably since IPO started. Probably since actually after the first .com boom, there was a big change, and then there hasn't been in a long time. So this is all living, breathing, and this is, I think, especially for an IPO, you want to partner with an outside resource that has an outside communications resource that has been through this before. But even if you're not imminently, you're about to file your papers with the SEC, that are S1, but you want to build towards one over the next year. You want to work on things like making sure, again, that your long-term messages are aligned with what your investor team is doing as they start their testing the waters process. You want to make sure that PR is completely aligned with what they're saying. Are you going to get in the same level of detail? Absolutely not. But having directionally, making sure you know where you're going. You want to establish what the lawyers will call your regular course of business, cadence of announcements. The idea is that you're not supposed to be, say you're not putting out a lot of press releases, you're not talking to media a lot, and then, so when you get to your quiet period, you don't have any sort of established regular cadence that you can point to and say, we're just following our normal course of business, which is what you're supposed to be doing in the quiet period. So you want to establish that in advance. You want to make sure that you're being well-rounded in your communications, that you're, again, not just talking about your product, but the company as well, whether that's growth, momentum. At the same time, you always want to be careful about any metrics that you give out, because I've seen media's favorite thing to do is go back and dig up those times when you said you were profitable, and you didn't specify that you meant cash flow positive, and then that's one comes out and it's all out there. So you want to be thoughtful about any metrics that you put out and know that they're going to be out there forever. Conducting an overall perceptions audit, from understanding what the market thinks of you, from the financial analyst to communications, business media, to the analysts, having a really good understanding of where you are grounded and where you want to move the business over the next year plus. Again, identifying those key business press, even identifying who are some of the media that cover IPOs, and is there an opportunity to educate them on your business. Broadening the spokespeople bench, we already talked about. I'm just going to go through this because I want to leave time for questions. You can start internally increasing the rigor around your communications. Sometimes a lot of companies share a lot of information with their employees. You might have to look at how you're doing that. And that's something, of course, you do in partnership with the rest of the executive team, especially legal and finance and HR. But making sure that you're acting like a public company before you are a public company, and just getting a sense for what the market looks like. Is the window open? Are there a lot of companies going public or not? And then I have this handy eye chart for actually things that you should think about when you're going through the actual IPO process, which I will not go through all right now because there is a lot here. And again, this all evolves depending on things like, I think most companies these days actually end up doing like a confidential filing, but say you have a direct listing, that is not discussed in here at all. So this is a sample. You would want to make sure that you have a partner who knows your specific situation, understands, again, any sort of feedback or anything you've gotten from the SEC, and understands the current market landscape before you develop something like this. But this is a good guideline of things that you need to do during the process and start thinking about. So I've now been talking for 50 minutes straight. I hope that you found that valuable. I'm certainly happy to answer questions if you have them afterwards. You can feel free to email me. We are listed on the Insight platform, so you can also find out more about us that way. And again, I'm very happy also to make any kind of recommendations you may need, even if we're not the right agency for you. I'm happy to help you find or make recommendations to find one. I think that's all. I don't know if anyone has any questions.
Yeah, I think we have time for one question. Thank you so much. That was really informative. So if anyone has a question, feel free to enter it now. Otherwise, we'll give you some time back in your day. Okay, great. Well, we did get one. When hiring an agency, does location matter?
I would say it's up to you, honestly. Well, first of all, these days, most companies are so distributed, there's not one place where every executive is. We have an Insight company as a client right now. The executive team is scattered between Southern California, the Bay Area, and New York City. And of course, Highwire has offices in New York and in San Francisco, so we can meet them where they are, but in reality, a lot of businesses we all know these days end up being done over the phone. Having someone in your same time zone can be nice, but I think that the bigger factor should be, is it a good fit for you? Do you trust and like these people, and do they have the right expertise?
Couldn't agree more. Well, thank you everyone for tuning in today, and thank you, Kim and team, for putting together a great webinar. And we'll be sharing the recording by the end of the day. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.